this chart that comes from the work of Nancy Hennessy. This is her ABCs of background knowledge, and she sort of organizes it into 3 components to really be thinking about. And it's the most helpful way I've come up with to sort of talk about all the parts of background knowledge. So the A stands for activate and assess. And this really serves 2 purposes: helping educators kind of identify what do students already know about a topic. And then it also prompts students to be thinking about those things as they get into the text that they are working with. So we see that in like anticipation guides. I'm going to show you one of those on the next slide. Questions and prompts ahead of time, our good old classic KWL, if you're someone who's a fan of those, or charts where students talk about what they know, what they want to learn. And then, of course, visual images that sort of get kids thinking about certain topics. The B stands for build, and that is the part where you are directly teaching any key background knowledge that students need before they read or listen. I always have one word of caution there, though, is you want to be very mindful that you are not teaching content that they're about to learn in the text that they're going to read or listen to. You want to think about what is the author assuming that these students already know before they read this, and that's the background knowledge that you're going to focus on building. You can do this with other texts and read alouds, different hands-on experiences, virtual field trips, authentic artifacts, introducing vocabulary words. So you're seeing that overlap a little bit. And then the C stands for connect. And this is the idea that as we're learning new things, we want to make sure we're intentionally connecting it back to our knowledge and our understanding of a topic that we're reading about. And so instructionally, this kind of looks like going back to the things you did in activating and building and just making those connections really explicit and obvious for students and giving them chances to talk about it or even write about it if they have the skill level. So I want to share with you one strategy for each of the ABCs. So the first is activate, and that is an anticipation guide. And I think that these work really nicely within kind of the podcast setting, but especially within these cool debate podcasts that they have in Listenwise, where you know kids are going to get ready to argue like their perspective on a particular debate. So in this anticipation guide, I just have some true-false statements before we listen to the debate. Should scientists resurrect extinct species? And it's all about woolly mammoths and the potential to kind of clone them through elephants. It's kind of a fascinating topic. But ahead of it, I can ask students things like, true or false, scientists can bring extinct animals back to life. Well, now I've got their interest piqued because they're probably thinking of Jurassic Park. True or false, woolly mammoths are related to elephants. That's a really important connection for this, so I want them thinking a little bit about elephants. True or false, scientists should test cloning on animals. And we may have to explain what cloning is in that case, but it's setting them up for a really interesting debate as they go. For the build, this is perhaps another very obvious example when we're thinking about podcasts and the opportunity to listen to podcasts with students. But there are so many excellent podcasts that will help build background knowledge for students before a text you need to read or before a unit of study. And in Listenwise, they have these collections set up. I found one here that's all about life cycles for the elementary level. And what a powerful way to get kids sort of thinking about life cycles as you're about to enter into a science unit on the topic. One caveat, like I mentioned earlier, if any of these animals are ones I'm going to specifically read about in my unit, I might skip that podcast because I don't want to give them all of that information ahead of time. I want them to access it through the unit. But these ones are really very interesting. And then I, of course, had to include some of the fun ways that you can also build background knowledge if you were doing a life cycles unit, and that is by bringing in animals or plants to watch the actual life cycle in real life. So butterflies, tadpoles, I've done ladybugs before. I've even found praying mantis uthicas to watch. Those are cool, but not if you don't like lots of little bugs. And then plants are a really easy one to do. So bean seeds are very successful to grow in like a plastic bag so kids can watch the life cycle happening. So I get a little excited thinking about these things because this is really the fun parts of teaching is getting into that science and social studies content and teaching kids stuff. Next up is the connect part of the ABC model. And for this one, I have what I like to call my low budget KWL, because I was super guilty of never going back and doing the L part of the KWL. We would talk about what we knew, we'd ask questions about what we wanted to learn, and then we would never come back to it at the end of the unit. And I like this one because it's a little more immediate and connected. So the idea is that before reading something or before listening to a podcast, you make a bunch of predictions about what you think you're going to hear or discover. And then right afterwards, you record the connections or the things that you've learned. And so this podcast is all about traveling into the deep ocean. So ahead of time, we might talk about what do you think is in the deep ocean? And I've got some like serious suggestions you might hear from kids or silly ones you might hear. And then afterwards, we can come back and say, is that what we discovered, or did we learn something new, or did we have our understanding corrected or changed in any kind of way? So if you're guilty of not doing the last part of a KWL, this might be a good one for you.